What's going on, guys? Teen Mechanic here. Before we even get into this video, I mean, the wind is insane, so sorry if there's any wind noise. Most of this is going to be spent inside the car, so hopefully we can just get through this intro with no issues. But this is all going in the Monaco. Today we are putting in a sound system, the most budget-conscious sound system that I could put together inside of this car. If you don't know, if you didn't see the last radio video I did on this car, it only has an analog AM radio, and it had one single speaker that fell apart in my hands, and it deserves a new sound system, as do I, because I listen to music a lot. Music matters a lot to me. I love music, playing music, listening to it, and this is important to me. But some of this stuff I already had. Some of this stuff isn't really actually that cheap. I mean, for example, this Hertz amplifier, and that's it. But I mean, oh, and this amp kit, because you know the amp, and yes, this sub here. I'm gonna get made fun of a lot with this subwoofer. It is a Walmart. It's a Scoosh brand subwoofer from Walmart. I think it was $30. And it sounds okay. It's 4 ohms, not 2, which is strange. But it's a good sub for what I need. I don't need a sub that's gonna make the car rattle. I just need something because the speakers I have aren't really that full of bass. So just something like that. But anyway, so I can get out of this wind, let's get into this video. First thing I'm gonna start with is installing that speaker in the dash. What the hell was that? The hell was that? Oh, caught that on camera. Okay, guys, I just caught that on camera. That was the trailer jack in the front was just slipped off some boards. That was pretty freaky. I guess I have some PTSD from the brake incident. Anyway, here is, let me move this out of the way. Here is the new speaker. It's a Boss speaker. Not sure. It says it's a Chaos CH4330, 400 watt, 4 ohm, blah, blah, blah. So I soldered this original pigtail on, and I soldered this aftermarket speaker wire on so that I can put this on the new head unit and put this on the original head unit, so I can still use both. That I recorded a clip. I'm not sure if it's going to be in the video. I imagine it will be. Alright, guys, so the first thing before we actually get into installing the speaker is this here. This you might recognize from last video. It's 43 years old, falls apart in your hand. The netting fell off just from sitting around. But what I gotta do is, well, rather what I'm gonna do is get that old connector off. Now, the thing is, I'm kind of worried about it because I'm worried that that old solder is maybe made with some different stuff, or maybe isn't as safe as it should be. But I don't know. We'll do it. I'm gonna wear this mask. I know it's not really much, but I'm gonna wear it and just try to get it off here. Let's see. Actually, no. You know what? We'll be okay. I'm gonna use these pliers here. Actually, they're wire strippers. See if it melts. Yep, there we go. One of them's free. Second one, we'll see if we can get her free. There we go. Look at that. So just melted 43-year-old solder and got this connector off, but let's see if we can pull this thing through. There we go. Alright, so here's that connector for the new speaker. Okay, so now with this thing, we're going to go out with the old and in with the new. Check this out right here. This is the cheapest possible 4x10 speaker I could find, and they're Boss brand. They're okay actually. I mean, they sound okay. Like, that's the thing, is they're really cheap, but they don't sound too bad. I believe this is fake right here. It says it's a 3-way speaker, but I think that's fake. This is real. I don't know about that. And this obviously is the speaker, so that's real. But anyway, what I'm going to do is go ahead and solder this original connector on. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because if you didn't catch last video, what I'm wanting to do is actually have this connected to this speaker and be able to plug it into the original AM radio and have it work. Because to me, there's a lot of the point is lost of having that original radio if it's not even able to be used. So I'm actually going to keep it in use, and I'm going to put this connector on so that I can have that AM radio working if I want. But I'm also going to, for example, I'm going to solder an extra set of wire on it as well to plug into the aftermarket head unit. But anyway, we'll go ahead and solder this on right now. But anyway, without further ado, this is all the perfect length to fit inside the dash. The microphone is up here out of the way, so sorry if you can't really hear me all that great. But so what I'm going to do is feed the wires down into the dash. And they should all be right about there. Yep, there they are. I see them both. Okay. So I had to do a little bit of modification to the basket of that speaker because it was too big to fit in there. So I just used some tin snips and cut some pieces off, and it fits now well enough. But yeah, now what I'm going to do is I have speaker mounting screws here, so I'm just going to go ahead and, sorry if you can't really see what I'm doing. But there are two little Phillips screws, very simple to do, nothing crazy, and I'm just gonna screw this speaker into the dash, and hopefully we can get it all to mount up correctly. So I'm gonna do this off camera and then show you what I've done after. Alright guys, so it still wouldn't mount up correctly, so I have these small little tin snips here. It would fit in on this side, but this side was just a little too short, so what I'm actually gonna do is just clip a little bit of this mounting tab out, just like this. Hopefully you can kind of see what I did there. That way it's a fork so it can slide in, and then that should actually allow it to mount up just on the end of it, because I just want it to be in place. It doesn't have to be mounted up perfectly, and there is some foam so it won't rattle around, but just thought I'd share that with you and not do that without you. Alright guys, I got that speaker mounted in. It's in there right now, all screwed in, not going anywhere. This top dash panel here doesn't quite fit over it, so I'm just going to kind of force it to screw down. It's just such a small little clearance issue that there's nothing really to worry about. So I'm just going to force it down, push it down, and screw it in. But yeah, speaker's mounted up. So now, the next thing that we got to do is, I'll take you off the tripod here. Next thing that we have to do is go ahead and get this all prepared. So the other connector is way up here in the dash, can't see it, and that goes to that connector right there for the original head unit. But this here is going to go to our aftermarket head unit, which I have right here. So if you're wondering what head unit I got the the cheapest one I could find. It's a no-name IGOS or something like that, I don't know. And it says car MP3 player with USB/SD port. It says 12 and 24 volt. Those look like check boxes. This is going to be the 12 volt system. But this is the cheapest one I could find. It ran me 38 bucks. So it's I looked at the reviews obviously because I saw some other $30 ones and they were you know, it said broke after 2 days, and this one's there was a couple of 5-year reports and it said still going strong. So I'm going to use this. Comes with these connectors and instructions, and looks like a radio removal tool. It comes with a remote, which I'm not going to use, but you know, whatever. And here's the head unit itself. I'll go ahead and try to get this out. Kind of multitasking here. Alright, so I hope you guys can hear me too, because the microphone's kind of a lot further away than it usually would be. But as you can see, here it is in the plastic wrap. We'll go ahead and take it out. Here it is. It actually feels pretty solid. I was expecting it to be all creaky and crackly, but it feels like it's one solid unit. It's got a 10 amp fuse in it. Those, what are they? Not VGA, RCA cables right there. You have your antenna port right there, and of course the hookup there. This car has no antenna. I don't know where I'm going to get one that fits. I probably won't, because my truck antenna, I might just find a way to epoxy it in there or something like that, some generic one. The other option is just go on Amazon and get one that mounts up on the windshield there. That would work too. Here's the wiring diagram right on it. But yeah, this is really good because it can mount right there. Check out how good that worked out. I have this this mount here for an old CB that the original owner had in this car, and it's even too big, which is good because I can shrink it down. Right there, I can push this way. I can't, if it was too big, I can't move it that way, but I can push it that way. So that works well, and that's exactly where that's going to go, right there. That worked out perfectly. So now I'm going to go ahead. I have my wire strippers right here. As you can see, they've got a bunch of different gauges on them and stuff like that. And I'm going to strip this wire here, and I'm going to go ahead and have it all ready. But yeah, it's going to be pretty simple. Then we'll actually get into wiring this head unit up to make it work. But I'm going to see if this antenna from the old head unit fits in this one first. But I'll do this off camera. I'll show you how to strip, though. Nah, maybe not strip. I'll show you how to strip those wires. Okay. Alright guys, so here's the wire. I've got my strippers here. This is 16 gauge wire. So I'm going to find a little 16. On these strippers here it says STRD and SOLID, which is solid or stranded. And stranded wires like this one are a lot more fragile. And solid ones are just basically a solid piece of copper. But now you just find the 16 gauge, clamp it down, twist it around like this in a couple different spots. Then pops right off. And there you have it, a stripped wire. Now, if you see like 1 or 2, maybe 3 strands coming off is fine. But if you see like, I don't know, 5 or 6 or a ton of strands falling out, then I would cut it and then restrip it, because even that can cause an issue where wire would be too thin and then burning up. But anyway, that's how you strip wire. Very simple. These are manual wire strippers. They even sell automatic ones where you just put it in the right gauge and just go and it automatically strips, which is really cool. But it works in this case. So yeah, I just thought I'd show you how to do that. Now I'm going to see if I can get this radio to mount in place, I guess. We'll see how that works. Okay, well, I got this radio bracket in. It's very loose. I am using cotter pins. Yes, that's right, cotter pins. I did this very terribly. I could not find any screws that would fit inside those, like, those screw holes are just so small. But anyway, I used some cotter pins, and it's not going to hold up, but I'm going to go out to the store and buy some. But I'm just leaving it like this just for the purposes of this video. But aside from that, the bracket is in, the speaker's plugged into the stock head unit, and this antenna here fits. This antenna fits in the new radio. Here is the new radio. I took the bezel off of it. It's seems pretty cheap feeling. Obviously, the more I feel it, it's like maybe 100 grams. It weighs nothing. But yeah, so this is what is going in it. Yeah, I'm not really gonna mount it until I can until everything is set up. But in the meantime, though, we have these connectors here. So we've got ground. Let me make sure I remember all these without looking at the wiring diagram. Okay, ground. Believe that's constant power. This, I believe, is a trigger wire, whether that be antenna or amp. And this, oh, I can't remember what that is. Let me check. Oh, right. This is the accessory trigger wire. So it's like you run it to the ignition, and then it comes on. But yeah, so that's what this connector does here, and then this connector is for all of the speakers here. You've got positive and negative for everything. I'm not exactly sure what the orientation of all of them are. I know this is like left rear, right rear, some positive and negative. And then so there's a black line on the opposite, or on the negative of every color. So yeah, that is what I'm going to do now. I guess I'm just going to mount it up. The one thing, though, is that with this, I'm not going to be able to do front left, positive, negative, front right, positive, negative, because there's only front center. So I guess what I'm going to have to do is just mount one of them. So I'll figure out which one that is, whether it's gray or white. But anyway, I wish this camera would stay focused. But yeah, I guess what I'll do, because I have some black wire, just bulk wire, so I guess I'm just going to, I believe it's 14 or 18 gauge. I don't remember. Anyway, I'm just going to mount that up. But yeah, so this should actually go fairly simply. I'm not sure which gauge it is. It could be, I don't know. But anyway, I've been talking a lot, so I guess what I'll do is set you guys up somewhere and wire this up. All right, guys, so now we're at the battery here. So what I'm going to do is I have this blue wire, not sure what gauge it is, but it'll suffice. This is going to be the power wire for the radio. So it has a red and a black wire inside of this casing here. Obviously, the red is going to be the positive, the black is going to be the negative. So here is the positive terminal of the battery. Let me go ahead and try to zoom you in here. So this here is the positive terminal of the battery. Now this is where the power comes from. So what I'm going to do is disconnect this nut here that clamps it to the terminal. And this is going to be where our positive power comes from. I have what are called eyelets, which are these here. I'll show you. I'll open it here. So what an eyelet is this here. Now this, you crimp to the wire, and then it goes over a stud just like this, and then that's where your power comes from. So that's what I'm going to be using to power the radio. Now it's going to be very simple. Shouldn't really take much strife at all. But there's one eyelet that's already crimped that I had to save from another wire, so I might end up soldering that one. If you're wondering if you need any special tools to complete this job, there are two that come to mind. One would be a soldering iron, and the other would be a radio removal tool, depending on your head unit. I don't need that, but soldering iron is pretty important because you're going to be soldering stuff, usually, if you're doing it properly, and using heat shrinks, which I also have, not here, but I do have heat shrinks, and I'm going to be using those as well, just to protect it from the weather. So I'll show you how to do that all right now. Okay, guys, so I have everything here. Here are the heat shrinks. There's a lighter to shrink them. Don't use a lighter if you don't need to. If you have a heat gun or even a really hot hairdryer, use that. Lighter's all I really have right now. I have a hairdryer, but it won't get hot enough. So, yeah, no, I don't have a heat gun either, which I really need to invest in. But I'm going to use a lighter for now, just as long as you keep it moving and keep it farther away. But anyway, so now what we're going to do is go ahead and measure out the wiring. That's the first thing that we have to do. So it's pretty simple to do that. All I'm going to do is kind of have it around here, kind of held in place on the battery area. And then we're going to run it into the cab. Now that is easier said than done, but it should be doable. We'll see what we can do here. Okay, so I'm going to start right here at the battery. So I'm just kind of going to hold this in place with the terminal here. Shouldn't be too difficult. We'll just stick it right there. Now we're just kind of going to run it this way along other wiring conduit. Just follow other wires because we're going to be adding our own conduit later. So follow it and find a spot that actually goes into the firewall. That's the easiest way to do it. Another thing to take into consideration here, guys, is make sure that you're working on a cold engine. You don't want to be moving wiring around the engine bay when it's really hot or like you just got home and the exhaust is hot, because that right there is a recipe for disaster. So I'm going to try this side here. Maybe we'll have better luck. And so I noticed in my last several videos there's been audio issues. That connector here is really finicky and doesn't work properly. So I'm going to have to get a new mic, but that's okay. That's doable, I guess. We'll wait until I'm racking in 6 figures a year, even 2 figures a year from YouTube, but we'll see there. So anyway, guys, I think you pretty much probably get the premise by now. I'm just looking for a spot to run this wire through the firewall. If you have to unbolt something, do it. Just try to find a sensible spot. It's more difficult with an older car because there's not really all that many electronics in it. Therefore, there's not a need for a bunch of electrical connectors to go into the dash. But I'm going to find a spot here and I'll show you where I put it when I have. Alright guys, I'm now recording on my phone because I was just starting and stopping with the camera too much. And it's quite a cumbersome process actually. But, so now, right in here, if you can kind of see where that blue wire is going through the firewall, not really. I have it poked through an HVAC grommet. It's just going in with some vacuum lines. I've left enough slack in the engine bay for proper routing, but that's even probably too much, so I can probably push a little bit more back in there. But on the other side here in the interior, we have tons to play with. So we've got the wire coming in from the firewall there, and this wire is all really just needs to go right to there. So it's going to be very easy to do. So now I'm going to move to the inside and do that. Okay, so hopefully you can hear me. My mic is sitting on the seat right there. But now we have this wire here. And now all we got to do is snake it up here and just find a good spot for it, all in all. So I'm just trying to think. The rule of thumb, try to find other wiring harnesses because they are routed properly by the factory, and you're pretty much safe 100% of the time just sticking with that. So what I'm gonna do is snake up over the steering column here, keep it absolutely away from all moving parts whatsoever. There we go, it's coming over those fresh air vents. And maybe grab a couple zip ties too, just to make sure that nothing unexpected happens. Also, make sure you keep it free of metal and, you know, surfaces that will chafe the wire. I'm hoping you guys can hear me okay. It's not ideal, but whatever. Just snake it up over a bunch of wiring harnesses and make sure that it's in a good place that's absolutely out of the way. And so far that's been working out. And then I think we're good there. I honestly think I'll just grab some zip ties and just zip tie it in, but it's really in. It's fine. It's fine the way it is. So anyway, that's where we're gonna leave it. Now what I'm gonna do is cut it, and we'll go back into the engine bay and probably try to hook it up to the battery. That's what we'll do now. Okay guys, here we are back where all the magic happens. Anyway, well, at least the way I see it. But here we have the wires that we cut. I went ahead and stripped away that blue protective casing. This blue is just so that it doesn't chafe. We're going to put a wire loom over all the wires that come into the engine bay, and I'll show you how we're going to do that later. I don't have any right now, so we're just wiring it up as is for now. So what I have to mention first is I also bought something here, and these are inline fuses. So the way these work is it goes in line with something. For example, what you would do is you'd connect it right here to this wire. Whoops, can't really see what's going on. You'd connect it to the wire you have going in, and then you'd connect the other end to the battery. And then if there's like a ground over here, it will pop the fuse, and there's no fuse in it right now, and then you can replace the fuse if necessary. But that is what we're going to do here, just to protect everything and make it extra safe. So first thing I have to do is grab the soldering iron. It's already nice and hot, so I'm going to grab that. Then we're going to grab some heat shrinks, and then we're going to solder this right to the wire here. Okay guys, so be very careful when soldering. Make sure you have proper ventilation, whatever. I'm outside, so I'm doing okay in that aspect. But make sure your soldering iron doesn't touch anything because it is extremely hot. Now, I'm not showing you how to solder. I'm not great at soldering, but there are lots of good videos on YouTube if you want to know how to solder. Chris Fix has an amazing one, and that right there, well, that's all you really need. So what I'm going to do first is go ahead and cut this wire right here. So what I'm going to do is, because we only need it so long, I'm going to cut that off just like that. So we have a pretty good length there. And then I'm going to take this fuse here. Make sure you know what gauge it is. I'm not sure if that's oxidized copper or what. They're pretty cheap, so hopefully it does okay. It's pretty easy to figure out what gauge your wiring is. In this case, it is 16 gauge. It's either 14 or 16. Let's try 14. So if it's 14 gauge, it's pretty simple. You just strip the wire right here, pop the casing off. Yep, it was 14 gauge. So here's our stripped piece of wire. Then we're going to do the same thing for the other side, except we want a pretty short little strip here. We don't want much stripped off. Okay, so here we have either side stripped. Sometimes these fuses come where they're in a circle and then just cut them, and that's how it works. So don't be deterred by that. But now we can actually go through with soldering this together. Now the gauge of wire, if there's a little bit that differs, it shouldn't actually, it's not really the end of the world because you're going to be messing with the fuse. But that's not a big deal here. So I'm just going to go ahead and strip our power wire there. So how to solder, how I do it, I'm not doing it properly because you're supposed to, when you have these two connected, let me try and zoom you in here. When you have these two wires connected, you're supposed to press the iron against them both and then drip the solder through the wiring. I like doing that, but if I'm doing a good job here, which I would like to be, but it just takes a long time, so I might not do it, but we'll see here. So what you do, press the wires together just like this, and then twist them together. Try to make sure it's as meshed together as possible. And there you go. So now it's connected just like that, and that's all that we need to do. So now, to solder, this iron is very hot, and sometimes when it's windy and cold, which it kind of is today, you have a pretty difficult time. The other thing is you want to use flux. I have flux. I don't remember where I put it, but it should be. It's pretty easy. You just dip the wire, each wire end in flux. So all I'm going to do is just heat this up here. Try not to touch the casing because it just melts. So I changed my mind. I'm just going to do the lazy method and the not good method, if you will, the not good method. And I'm just going to drip solder all through the wires if I can, but I'm not doing it properly, which is no big deal. Sometimes you can actually just put a bead of solder on top like that and then melt it all through the wiring, which actually is what I'm going to do here. But anyway, I'm not showing you how to solder here because I'm not qualified to teach you that. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the video off, and then I'll get back to you when it's all done. All right, guys, I've done the soldering. That was quite frustrating, actually, because, you know, doing it when it's cold and windy is like one of the worst possible things you can do. Really nerve-wracking. Okay, guys, now we're going to go ahead and shrink this heat shrink. So, like I said, unfortunately I have to use a lighter, which isn't even going to light because of how cold and windy it is. There we go. So, you get the point. Just do this until it shrinks. Careful not to melt it, though. This isn't going to work. I'm going to have to go do this probably inside or something. Alright, guys, so I got that heat shrink on, and this is about what it should look like when it's done. Nice and tight and really squeezed on there. So that looks good. But right here, now we have this eyelet. Now, to crimp this on, it's very simple. You want to make sure that you have... Probably twist this is a good idea. And here, let me focus you here. Okay, guys, so now that you have this, you just want to go ahead and make sure... You want to put this in there. Make sure it's twisted nice and tightly, just so that it'll fit inside of there. And then you want to crimp down. You can actually see it poke out the other side there. That's actually a little too long. You don't want it to poke out the other side. So what I'm going to do, you want it to be fully seated and not poke out the other side. So really, you don't need much. So I'm just going to cut part of it off just to make it the perfect length here. And now you can see it's just the right length. So now you can put it in, make sure it goes in properly, and you can see it is fully seated. So now these double as crimpers here. You can see it says do not use on live circuits, obviously. But then you can see insulated, non-insulated, and insulation. Yeah, so that's how you do it. It tells you everything pretty much that you would need to know on here. And we need to do... This is the right one to do right here. So, actually it has to go this way. And you just crimp it right on there. Let me, you'll actually see it. Crimp. Crimp. There you have it. That is super tight. The one thing with this is you should put a heat shrink on this end. This is actually pretty stupid that I didn't, so I'm going to put some electrical tape right around it just to kind of hopefully help it a little. But anyway, this here is now the contraption which we are going to mount to the battery to supply power to the radio. So, as you can see just around the corner here is the positive terminal in the battery. So what we're going to end up doing is slipping this eyelet right over that terminal that you can see right there. And then I'm gonna clean this first, but then we're gonna put the washer on, and then well, actually, probably, yeah, no, I'll put this on, then the washer, then the nut, and then that side's mounted. Now we're going to do pretty much the same thing with the ground, except with the ground, we're going to strip this and just put an eyelet on it, because you don't need a fuse on the ground. But, yeah, so that is what I'm doing on this end. Then we'll go and solder it to the radio on the inside. All right, guys, so here we are back inside the car, and here is that end that is connected to the battery and ground and whatever else. So that means there should be 12 volts actually going to this. That just occurred to me. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect that terminal. Okay, so now that there is no power going to this, and it's safe to work on, now here is the connector. I'm going to go ahead and start stripping wires here. So here's black, which is ground, and I'm going to check the wiring diagram first. Yeah, so yellow is the power or the continuous power. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and strip her out here. Okay, so there we go. There's the wire stripped. And I actually, before we go ahead and start stripping the radio thing, I'm going to go ahead and start stripping this power connector here. Yes, I just used tin snips for that. All right, guys, here is the connector. We finally have these stripped out now. So what I'm going to do, go ahead and mesh these together, solder them together. You get the point. I'm going to strip the ground, do the same thing with the ground, mesh them together, and then solder them. And then I don't think I'm even going to use heat shrink. I think I'm just going to use electrical tape. But that's what I'm going to do here. So yeah, should be pretty easy. I don't even think I need to film it, because my batteries are all dying, and I'm fighting with daylight here. I'm hoping to have this radio installed by before it gets dark. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just try and connect all of these connections here and see what I can do. Okay, guys, so those are all soldered up now, but now moving to the trigger wire for the radio, or the accessory power. As you can see down here, these are the wires that come out of the steering column and the ignition. This red one's always hot, this blue one is always hot, and that's it. Now, I measured every single one with this multimeter here, and what you do to do that is take your red positive lead, set it to 20 volts, because the highest you're going to see is 12. So set it to 20 like you would if you know how to use a multimeter. Then take your, first take your black one, and I just saw this bolt right up here, so I just touched it to that. That's a solid ground for just small measurements like this. And then I took this red one and I tested each one of these wires. You test the metal connector where it goes in, and that is how you measure it, like that. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. But I tested it, and that purple wire in the center of your screen, this one that my probe is on there, that is the one that is the accessory power. So if you turn the ignition backwards or have it running, that is the one that's going to supply the power, the accessory power to the radio. So now, what I'm going to do is I have some black wire on a spool, and I'm just going to run a wire from that to the connector, and it's going to be very straightforward. Let me show you. All right, guys, so as you can see, here's the connector. So how I'm going to go about doing this is I'm going to just grab my wire cutters here, and of course the battery's disconnected here, don't be stupid with that, but I'm just going to snip it. I snipped that a little too short on this end. Normally you want to be very careful of that. Don't cut it too close to the connector, because then you're kind of screwed, and don't cut it way up here where you can't reach it. So actually I think it's probably okay right where it is. Okay, guys, so I just clipped that wire, and I just realized that I bought these. These are called posi taps. Now that's quite frustrating to me. I just wasn't thinking, I guess, but these are really cool. So if we open up this bag here, so these here are little cylinders that if you unscrew one side of them here, you can see they have really pointy, sharp needles. So those will probe the wire, and this will keep it clamped together like that very easily. That's what you're going to use on one end there, and on the other end, it unscrews very similarly. And you just have, right here as you can see, you stick the new wire in this side, and it just it touches right there. It's very easy. It just meshes all in there. And this one obviously just rides on your old wire. Very simple. So now, unfortunately, what I have to do is solder that wire I just cut back together. And I guess that's all I'm going to do for now, and then I'll just, I'll just use the posi tab, because that's a much better idea. Alrighty then, so it is all in there correctly. I have the original wire going in and coming out, and as well as this accessory wire. I only needed one posi tab, thought I might need two, but I only needed one. Now it's back together. I'm going to put some tape around this so there's no risk of any metal touching metal. But anyway, so it's this wire's all in, so now I'm going to show you how to put it onto the connector. Actually, I don't even really think I need to. But, you know, I mean, this end, right? Like, it's all just stripping wires and soldering them together. If you see here, this end, strip it. And then the wire on the radio harness, the red one, strip it. And then solder them together. Very simple. So I'm going to just do that off camera, and then we'll see if we have power to the radio. All right, everyone. Here it is. All put together except for this blue trigger wire. That's for the amp later on in probably the next video. This one's already been really long. And anyway, this black one here is not the ground. This goes to the accessory power. This black one here is the ground. This red one is... this red one is the constant power. So now we're ready to see if we have power to our radio. First thing though, I hope you guys could hear me there. My mic fell off. First thing before we do that, we have to put a fuse in that inline fuse. If we don't put a fuse in there, obviously the circuit won't be completed and we won't get power, and it'll make it seem like we failed when we didn't. So what I'm gonna do, open up the trunk here. And we've got the fuses right here, tons and tons of fuses. So we'll open one up and find the right one. All right, so here we are. We'll go ahead and put, I think a 5 amp fuse should be sufficient. It really draws no power, really. So I'll go ahead and put the fuse in there. Everybody's really seen a fuse get put in before, but, you know, may as well show you. It's really hard to do one-handed. Of course, my camera's dead, but... here we go. So here we go. Put her in there. Should just clamp in. I can't. I got to do it two-handed, guys, or I'm going to bend it. But anyway, you get the point. All right, guys. The battery is now connected. Here is the connector. Before I start putting everything all neatly into the dash, we're going to actually see if we even get power to it. So what I'll do here is plug in the radio just like that. Grab the key here. Put it in. Moment of truth, guys. Holy crap, it works. Check it out. So, it really looks dim, but the clock, I really don't know how to set this clock here. Oh, power. Click power. Hi, tune. Oh, check it out. Guys, it's actually working. It works. Check it out. That is really cool. So that's how you do it. And then turn off the ignition and it goes off. Okay, guys. Well, that is how we do it. So what I'll do, I guess, is wire up the speaker in this video, the front speaker. The back speakers are going to have to be in a different video because that's a from scratch install just like this was. So what I'm going to do is check out the wiring diagram and see which ones are for the front and which ones are for the back. And yeah, then I'll wire up this front speaker, and then we'll see if this thing actually works. All right, here's a second moment of truth here. We're going to go ahead and plug this in. I have it wired up. I wasn't going to solder it all together. I was just going to kind of have it twisted together, but it's working now. So what I'm going to do, go ahead and turn this thing backwards and see. Oh, I heard it. I heard it kick on. Okay, tune it. Oh my God, the volume is high. So, turn it on, FM. Maybe it would help to put the antenna in it. Let's try that. It should work. I don't know what's going on here. Doesn't seem to be working. Not sure why that would be. Okay, so here we are back where the magic happens, at least for me. Oh wow, no, that cannot be said. Oh my god.